Well, let's begin the shout. And I'd like to begin with a little story. This is the story that takes place a long, long time ago. It's the story of Giuseppe, a very brilliant, talented sculptor. Story of Giuseppe. So Giuseppe loved doing sculptures in bronze. Bronze, of course, is the combination of copper and tin. And it's relatively easy to work with, considering easier than working with marble or stone or things like that. But Giuseppe loved creating everything. He started out creating little miniature bronze sculptures, and then they got bigger and bigger, did life-size sculptures, and he was known far and wide for being the greatest sculptor of all. One day he said, I want to do my masterpiece now. I want to create such an amazing sculpture of God. And of course, back in those days, everybody related God to looking like an old guy. So he designed this sculpture. It was 5 meters high. It was tall, the tallest sculpture that anyone in known history had ever attempted to do. And he spent a lot of time working on the design of God, but of course it looked like man. And things really haven't changed much since then. People still relate God to being some big old guy. But he created this work of beauty, paying attention to every little detail, becoming almost obsessive, giving his apprentices such a hard time anytime they made a little mistake or messed up, because he wanted this to be a sculpture that would endure through time to honoring God. And maybe showing people that God was always present. God wasn't just up in heaven somewhere, but God was here on earth as a sculpture. So it came the day that they would be pouring the molten bronze into the mold. You know the molds. You've done metal work, dear Linda. It came the day, so they mixed up a huge vat of molten bronze. The fires were hot, and here the bronze liquefied because of the fire, bubbling away, and was all ready to be poured into the first portion of the mold. At that point, Giuseppe was so careful about every little detail, wanted to know exactly the consistency of the molten bronze at the time, wanting to know that it was the right temperature and everything just right, the right colorings that had been added to it for extra effect. And he was close over the big cauldron of bronze going away, being heated up, and he looked over and went a little too far, fell straight into the vat of molten bronze. Now, you think that would be the end of the story, but of course, no. This is an Adamus tale. The story continues. The moment his body hit that hot liquid bronze, it melted. It didn't burn, it just melted and immediately turned into little crystals inside that bronze. It crystallized itself. And the funny thing was that you would expect that, well, poor Giuseppe would be, basically baked Giuseppe or fried Giuseppe by then, but he wasn't. He was now in this molten bronze, and he could feel himself. He could hear himself. He was aware the heat wasn't burning his skin because he had none left. It had all been crystallized, but he was in the midst of the experience, this liquefied, what was going to be God pretty soon, and he was in it. Well, the apprentices were busy and distracted. They had a lot to do. Giuseppe had given them so many instructions beforehand how this had to come off just at the right time and done absolutely right. So without regarding where was Giuseppe, they thought maybe he had slipped out to go to the restroom. They poured the molten bronze into the mold. And then they poured the other half and put them together and let them set. And now, here was Giuseppe cast into his own sculpture. the bronze cooled off and they removed the mold and admired the beauty of this very, very tall sculpture of God, were amazed at how it looked now, not just as a casting, but how it looked in real life. It was so tall and it looked so powerful and was very assuming in its authority and its power. Well, they were busy doing all the touch-up on this statue and finishing off some of the rough edges, tweaking it here and there, and nobody bothered to ask where Giuseppe was. And that statue sat for a few days before it was ready to be taken by an army of men into the village square and erected on top of the stand that they had put together. And here's Giuseppe inside the statue, literally fused into the bronze. He could hear himself. He could feel himself. He could hear the others talking, and he wondered, how come nobody's saying, where's Giuseppe, where's Giuseppe? But, well, he was known to love the women in town, and they just figured he must have ran off with some young woman and perhaps maybe never come back. But it was their task to put up this beautiful sculpture, which they did. And now, here's this sculpture of God looking out onto the village and onto the village people with Giuseppe cast inside of it. Locked in, couldn't get out. He tried screaming, nobody could hear. He tried pushing his way out, but that bronze was so strong, nothing would do. He wondered what next for Giuseppe. It wasn't too long before people actually kind of forgot about him. Again, they assumed he ran out of town with someone or something, or who knows. But pretty soon, the villagers would come by every day and honor this statue of God, not knowing that Giuseppe was looking at him, could feel him, could see him, could hear him. And then one generation after the other, admiring this statue of God, people came from far and wide to see this work, and pretty soon they forgot who actually was the artist that did it. It was just God. Pretty soon the tales around the countryside came to be that this statue just appeared one day, and it had some odd characteristics. That even though it was just bronze, it almost appeared at times to be alive. Some claimed that at night it glowed a little bit. Some claimed to hear voices coming from it. Generation after generation, they filed by on the statue of God here the whole time, Giuseppe looking out at them, wondering if he'd ever get out of the statue. He became so ingrained in the statue after a while that he became the statue. There was no longer really a Giuseppe, there was just the statue there. He forgot about who he was. He forgot his name after a while. He was now just the statue. And stood there day after day for all to admire and all to worship. Many generations went by now, and the toll of the elements began to show up on the statue. The wind, the rains, the storms, especially the pigeons. And slowly, the statue of God, created by Giuseppe, started to wear away. Pretty soon, it didn't have the same charm it did when it was new, in its first 100 years. Pretty soon, it was just getting old and dirty. People from around the land stopped coming by to visit it. People in the village stopped coming by to worship it or ask for prayers to be answered. Pretty soon it was all but forgotten. The shrubs began to grow up around it, trees towering over it. And pretty soon it was just all but forgotten, here with Giuseppe locked in. And then one day, 1,000 or more years later, with the statue of God standing there over the village, but now pretty much forgotten, one day a big storm came up. I came across the horizon, a huge tornado, and it moved through the village and went straight to the statue of God made by Giuseppe, straight to it. And by now the statue was pretty worn out, had holes in it, lost a lot of the detail, was discolored, wasn't much of anything. It was pretty drab, pretty boring. And this tornado headed straight for it, knocked it over onto the ground, shattered it into thousands of pieces. And at this point, all this commotion woke up Giuseppe after over 1,000 years of being stuck in his own sculpture. It woke him up. And upon awakening, he didn't really still realize who he had been, but he knew he had been trapped in this sculpture for a long, long time. Upon awakening, there was almost a fear that came over him. Who am I now? I'm no longer this statue. I'm no longer the statue of God. Who am I now? I am free, but what does that mean? What do I do with my freedom? I'm no longer cast into this statue. The statue is all in pieces now, scattered near and wide, but who am I? I have no identity anymore. Then Giuseppe heard kind of a voice from the inside. And that voice said, well, you're God. You played the role for over 1,000 years as a statue, now go out and live it. You're God. And Giuseppe said, well, I don't really have any other choices because I don't remember who I was. I have no sense of identity anymore. It was so locked up in this statue and I forgot who I was. I might as well just go out. Freedom, I don't know what that means. I know I'm free, but what does that mean? Giuseppe, similar to Katumi, just started walking. He started experiencing, and slowly, some of his memories of being Giuseppe came back, and memories that he would later learn were of past lives came back. Slowly, he began to realize that he had cast himself in his own identity as Giuseppe, the famous sculptor. He had cast himself in such a tight-locked identity that he forgot to be free and to be expressive. He forgot that he could create himself any way he wanted at any time, but he'd gotten so locked into himself, into his expression as the great sculptor that, well, literally it translated him into getting trapped in his own sculpture. So he walked a lot and traveled and met people, and all the time resisted ever building a defined identity again. He let himself have identity. He let himself enjoy his expression, but he resisted ever being trapped in a single identity again. Oh no, not after that 1,000 years in the sculpture of God. Now he realized how fun it was. One day he could be one thing, the next day he could be another. He could be a baker. He could be an artist. He could be a politician. He could be anything he wanted. He could just be a being walking from village to village, enjoying life, talking to other people. He realized that it is so easy to get trapped in an identity when the true God within says you are all identities, anything you want to be. And yes, you can dive deep into one. You can become trapped as if in a sculpture. But you're always free to create any new identity you want for yourself. So that's the story of Giuseppe, the sculptor. Not as good as my story, getting trapped in, you knew that was coming? Not as good as my story of being trapped in the crystal prison, but yet another iteration of it. One that leads into part of our discussion for today. One of the things that you're going to find happening to you right now, or has been happening to you, is that sense of identity that you shaped and created and sculpted for yourself and molded for yourself and then kind of got stuck in. It's breaking away. It's getting old right now. It's been subject to a lot of weather rain, wind, storms, other people, boredom, depression, you name it. But that old statue of you is starting to fade away. And that's scary to some. That's really scary. You've been in that statue, in that physical body and in your mind, in your identity for so long. You fear. Well, I know some of you say intellectually, oh no, this is all great, but when it comes right down to it, there's some fear there. What happens if all my identity is shattered? And you resist it, you try to protect it, and it doesn't eventually work. That storm, that tornado is going to find you because it's you. It's your soul saying, and the dragon saying, no, it's time. It's time for true freedom. It's time to realize that you are not just this identity. I mean, this identity is fine up to a point, but you are so much more than that. And if we have to shatter it, if we have to tear it apart, if we have to get you out of that statue, that sculpture that you've been in by force or whatever, it's okay. Because we know that ultimately you want to be a truly free being who has the capability to change identity, to change your expression, to change how you relate to others at any time. That's the Magi, that's the magician, the Merlin. Not trapped in a single identity other than arguably the I am that I am. But the I am that I am isn't a definition. It's consciousness. It's not a statue. It's open flowing air. I say this because as I work with you and watch you, and of course Kathumi doing a lot of work on the side with you, and we talk at least once a week. How is Shambhala? What are they doing? Kathumi, what is your perception? Where are they at? And we both realize that so much right now is about identity disillusion, falling apart, and it's frightening. And you try then to grasp, to hold on. You try to reinforce the identity. You don't have to. You just take a deep breath and let it go. It doesn't mean it's dead. It means now you're open to many other forms of expression, many different types of identities, not worrying that you're going to have all this aspect confusion or anything like that. But now you get to express and change and have the freedom now to re-identify or by identification. I hear the expression on the planet right now, people talking about identifying as such and such and such and such, and identifying as a transgender, identifying as a soldier, identifying with whatever. Here now, we're opening up those identifications. Why be singular in your identity? And why create an identity based on false gods? Why create an identity based on things that, maybe it was fun to experience for a little bit, but now it's time to let go and to truly be free. It's a pretty big shift, and we can feel the resistance on many of you of by identifying or re-identifying yourself, because the old identity falls apart. The dragon was instrumental in helping with that, break it apart. But you realize the dragon is also there. The dragon is you. The dragon is there so you can be so many things now, to be the Merlin, to be the human on the planet, to be a child in many ways, to be an artist, to be anything you want to be, and you can be them all. And that's the beauty of being the Merlin on the planet. You're not stuck in one form of identification. Your name is no longer so important, other than when you have to give your driver's license to the friendly police. The name is not that important anymore. The list of your accomplishments, your degrees, or your failures, or whatever it is that has shaped your identity is not that important anymore. It helped shape it. It helped cast it in a type of spiritual bronze, but now it's time for that to go away so you can truly be free, like Giuseppe being released from his sculpture. Take a good deep breath and feel into the beauty of your identity that you've created, the beauty that you've sculpted. Admire the beauty. Admire that it is God also, but like Giuseppe, let's not get trapped into that sculpture, into just that singular identity. The point is you go multi-identity now. And it feels a little awkward at first. Feels like you want to find your kind of your ground base, your baseline on things. Where's the balance point? Don't worry about it. Where you're at right now between your body, mind, your spirit, your soul, it all works itself out. That's, if there's any point I can impress on Shambhu right now, I've tried to do so in so many different ways. Stop trying to craft, stop trying to shape sculptures right now. Even of yourself as a master. Some of you are still, you're trying to do that. You're trying to say, well, what is a master? Let's define it. Then let's cast it in bronze as the master. It's not like that. The master is very fluid. The master time travels. The master is beyond space itself. The master doesn't need a definition of itself. Just the I am, I exist is enough for the master. It doesn't need to now define itself in what it dresses like or how it talks or anything like that. It is truly sans definition. You can be playful with it, have fun, have dress-up days, travel to different places, do different things. It's just right now, don't be Giuseppe getting caught in your own definition because it's changing. Don't work on a new definition. Don't work on a new identity of yourself. You don't need to. It evolves. It shines through on its own. If there's anything to do right now, it's simply to experience. Sometimes it means getting out of bed and getting out of the house. Go experience the new you, the new identities, plural, that you're creating. Go experience that. Let's take a deep breath with that and feel in. And this is not something you have to work at. I'm simply reporting to you on what's happening in your lives right now. Why you're feeling the way you're feeling. Why sometimes you feel you just want to break out of this old statue that you've been. Almost hoping that tornado will come along. I mean, almost wishing that it would come along. And I'll go so far as to say, you're creating that tornado to come into your life after you've been in that old statue for a long time, stuck in it. Now you're creating, the elements by themselves, the wind and the rain, wasn't enough to do it fast enough. So you're saying, bring on that tornado. I'm ready to bust out of this old human identity. It's a necessity, actually, in the evolution of the human species right now, the way you're going into it. It's a necessity to break out of that statue, to basically have it shatter in pieces. It doesn't have to hurt. It can be joyful. But it's almost a necessity to break out of that, to begin experiencing yourself on multiple levels. Yes, you can create identities, play with them, have fun with them, but just don't cast them in bronze right now. Let's take a deep breath with that into all that you are, into the many identities. And to beginning to experience them, yes, when you go out and you're with people, you go to the store or you do some creative project or whatever you do now, you begin to see how that old identity didn't need to be there so stuck as it was. Some people really fear not having an identity. I mean, it'd be difficult for most humans right now if we said, okay, next Sunday we're going to be taking away everybody's identity. They would freak out, as you say, because they're so identified with it. They're so cast into it. That's what they associate with. It's what they connect with when they get out of bed in the morning, and that's what they're connected with all day long, and they gripe about it and complain about it, but they'd be lost without an identity. You, Shambram, you don't need an identity. You can have fun with them, but you no longer need one. It's simply, I am that I am. Now, what do I choose to be in the moment? Let's take a good deep breath with that. That's what so many of you are going through right now, and will continue until that statue is broken. And like Giuseppe, you free yourself, but then there's that moment of freedom. You say, I don't know what to do with the freedom, and you want to jump back into the statue, but you can't. So you realize it's all perfect, including the loss of old human identity, so that you may realize all that you truly are. Okay, moving on. Let's take a deep breath. We'll give that just a moment to sink in. A deep breath, cup of coffee. So next on the schedule,